Welcome back, everyone. You should be making your way back into the main room from the breakouts. I hope that was a good experience for everyone. Just give people another minute or two to join back.
Yes, things seem to go pretty smoothly in our breakout room in terms of the technology. I'm just curious because, you know, this is a rather newer feature of Teams. I know that when it first came out, Mac and I separately had experiences with it, and it was pretty glitchy. So I'm curious to know how it worked out for everyone this time around. Okay, Scott's giving the thumbs up. That's great. I see one from James' bio as well.
Something I noticed I was curious about, that it seems that the chat in your breakout room is still like the big group chat. I don't know if that's different for Zoom or not, but like I was gonna pop something in the chat thinking it would go to the group I was talking with, but it was only that really large chat with everyone on it.
Were you in the main room, Sylvia?
It's Shayna, actually. That's okay. It's my last name. I don't know. Maybe I was. I'm not sure.
Jacob, were you in the main room?
Yeah, I think, Shayna, I think that was the issue. We did keep one of the breakouts in the main room, so that's why the chat stayed that way. But yeah, no, otherwise it should have, there should have been separate chats for each of the breakout rooms.
Gotcha. But other than that, I thought it worked really good.
Okay, awesome. Jamie, it seems like you couldn't see the team chat, so that's an interesting. Did anyone else?
Been in the main room and just assumed that that was the wrong chat, because that's what I was trying to. Somebody was talking on our team about, well, something came up in our chat. I was like, where's the chat? I couldn't see it. And I don't know if our group was the one that was in the main chat. So
if you were with Jacob, then you were in the main room. Yeah. So we're going to have the different teams, the different groups report out. Jacob, how many minutes were we going to give the different teams? Was it like 3 or 4 minutes?
Yeah, I think we have time for about 3-4 minutes exactly.
Okay, excellent. So let's start with the report out person from the main room.
Great. So that was Scott, and then James, who was our note taker, is just going to share the screen so that everyone can follow along.
All right. So that would be me. Yeah. So we decided to go with describing about the long range plan. And we were going to do a fairly short video, just 2 to 3 minutes, to just really show people about what the long range plan is, and then to lead them to get input from them. So really the big objective is to get the public to understand what the long range plan is, and then to get them to give us input on that, of what their vision is, and help us to understand that. So what we cared about is really, getting people to contribute their ideas and their thoughts, and helping them also understand that, this isn't a project that's going to happen in the next couple of years. This is a long range plan that's, up to a 20-year life frame. And, it's really just kind of setting the vision for the agency. And it's important because of that. It is setting that vision of, what we're looking for in the future for transportation. So the audience, and this could be kind of difficult because we weren't really trying to differentiate. We're trying to get all of the general public, as opposed to trying to get, one little niche or something of the audience. So we're trying to get everybody, input from all people, not just certain stakeholders. So, one idea we talked about was just the marketing could be an issue of trying to reach everybody and how we would do that. What do the audience care about? I mean, one important thing is, how it would affect the person personally, and to really get them to focus on that, how it could affect them, and get them to understand that from the video, and then from what we lead them to for whether it's a survey or meetings or whatever. And just focus on those big ideas, not the idea of, okay, what's going to happen in front of my house. So, getting a little feedback here from someone. So we talked about really how to promote it, is putting it on the agency website, YouTube, local cable access would be kind of cool too. Facebook. Someone mentioned Eventbrite and Meetup are ways that we could actually have put that on for a meeting, and people that just go into those different areas can see this, and we could have a meeting for that. but also post that information about here's a link to the video. So that's just another kind of a unique way of doing that, but really hitting all the social media and then those other ways. So the storytelling format we'd be using, and that was one thing we had a little bit of a discussion about, is one thing that could be an issue is that, you know, the front office may not care about doing something cute and funny. So we'd have to make sure that, yeah, we had good buy-in from them. You know, one thing we talked about is maybe even doing like a music type video showing different songs that relate to transportation, bridge over troubled water, life is a highway, those type of things. I kind of threw that out. But, you know, certain ways that we might be able to do that to get people to understand. One person had a real good idea too of someone that maybe we start off where they don't know what a long range plan is, and then we show the information, and then they have that aha moment of, oh, that's what it is, and kind of make that cute and funny. So, you know, that was just another aspect. The visual elements, what we were talking about is really trying to show people using different modes of transportation, letting them know the long range plan is much more than just roads and bridges, but it's transit, it's ferry, it's bike, ped, it's aviation, it's all those different aspects. The part about maybe having some links where people could link with a QR code to then get to the video. Let's see, what obstacles. I don't want to ramble on too long. Marketing could have been an obstacle, just thinking about how we would market it, how we would get that out to everybody, especially to try to reach, you know, all of the general public. The making sure that our front office and those that might say no to this after we've got it done are all on board as we're going through, so we don't film something and do something and then we're told, oh no, that's too cute or too funny and we're not going to do that. So just a way, and not only having the video, but maybe having some in-person also engagement alongside that. I think I hit most of what we had. Anyone want to add anything, or did I miss anything? If not, that's our video.
Great job. Thank you for that excellent report out. And maybe my group can go next, because we also decided to focus on the LRTP, but it's really interesting to see how, you know, we emphasize different ideas and have different thoughts on that. So Mary Beth is going to be our reporter. I ended up taking the notes, and that's why I commented on how neat James's notes were, because you'll see that mine don't look nearly as nice. But go ahead, Mary Beth.
Yours were fine. So the objective of the video was also long range plan. And when I was listening to the last presentation, I thought, wow, how funny that that's kind of a very popular topic, I think, how to get the public involved in long range plan, because it's not easy, and it's not many people want to be involved, but it's something we need to do. So the objective was to get the public more involved. We wanted to show the public that we value their opinion and consider their input. Also let them know about the federal requirements, because sometimes that's something that most of the public doesn't understand, and the fiscal constraint component of a long range plan, because the public could have some grandiose ideas of some changes, but if it doesn't fit into the fiscal aspect of a long range plan, it wouldn't be a great project to put in there. So we need to let the public know the federal requirements and fiscal constraint issues. So why this is important to our organization, I think I mentioned that earlier, but you want to foster more participation. You want to motivate the public to get involved. The video can provide some information on demand, so you could have it somewhere like the last presentation. You could put it on YouTube or Facebook or other social media platforms, so they can actually watch that video when they had the time to do it, and not necessarily only when the public meeting is being held or the information sessions on the long range plan. So that was kind of important. Our audience, again, was the same, everybody, because it is a long range plan. You want everybody involved, the whole general public. But we also talked about making the video tailored to the underserved populations that might not have access to the video. How else can we get them involved? Let's see, as far as the audience, we want to make sure that they're being heard, that how we will respond to their comments, because that's another big issue, is that people might give you comments or suggestions and ideas, and they don't know how you're going to incorporate that into the long range plan. So talking about that would be great. Let them know that the long range plan, it doesn't affect their daily lives, whether it's their commute, whether they take the bus, whether they drive, whether they walk the paths, how the long range plan will impact them in everyday life. So we also talked about putting this video on YouTube and Facebook and link it to our agency website or the long range plan website, whatever the group is that's doing the long range plan. So we had a discussion too about what type of storytelling we wanted to use, and we also thought conservative was the best idea, and maybe talk about a first person perspective. The beginning of the video could talk about the historical perspective from a previous long range plan, what was accomplished in the previous long range plan, maybe show pictures of projects that were accomplished, and then looking ahead in the future, because the long range plan is about usually like around 25 to 30 years. So yeah, the conservative was the best way to go. Maybe because we're a DOT, I don't know. We don't usually use humor that much. Again, the success story showing what projects were already done, especially ones that they might enjoy, like the bike paths or the sidewalks, maybe an intersection improvement that was a safety concern that is now fixed. And then maybe for the future improvements, give them some ideas of some future projects that they could look at or want to explore different alternatives for. So some of the obstacles and challenges, the first was budget, like how much do we have to purchase this software or buy the equipment to do the video. So maybe looking at free software and lower level equipment that would help us in a budget aspect. Maybe some obstacles could be technology, because we could be out in the public and the system breaks down. How are we going to have a backup plan for that? COVID challenges we're all in the middle of that right now. Dealing with production and how to collaborate during COVID, because right now it's mostly all virtual. And also dealing with the naysayers or the negative people that will come into your public meeting and cause some havoc there. So other notes about the video project, we want to make sure that LEP and low-income communities are accommodated. They might not have a way to view a video, so how are we going to address that? Translating the video into other languages as appropriate. We talked about maybe YouTube being used for the captioning in multiple languages. We found that to be a little more successful than the teens. Also, community TV can be used. So we have CTN here in Connecticut, and we try to get them involved. We let them know when we're going to be doing public involvement, so they could also live stream it for others to see on the TV. So that's what we have.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth, for the report out. I saw Kevin popping up earlier. Kevin, is your team ready and willing to go next?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think we forgot to designate a reporter, so I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So I'm happy to do the report out for this. But Marilee, if you don't mind sharing your screen with the notes, and thank you for volunteering to take the notes. So our group decided, if you scroll up a little bit, we decided to have our video be a construction update video for a project that happened in Concord, New Hampshire, reconstructing the main street through downtown Concord, New Hampshire. And our group thought we would probably need 3 to 5 minutes to really cover the full scope of things that would be important to have in this video. And the objective, we had several objectives that we wanted to get to because there's several audiences. So one was to convey and set expectations of the impact and potential disruption for various users. And this is a situation where the downtown is, of course, a business district, but it's also Main Street is also the primary thoroughfare through the city of Concord. So we wanted to communicate why this project was needed, why this justified the disruption to the business and to people's travel patterns, but also, mention things that were important to the agency, such as safety for users and the crew, being able to maintain access to all the businesses, and also to keep the public informed that the project is happening, it's moving forward, as well as putting information out there that might be needed for EMS or other first responders needing to access the area. It's important we were viewing this mainly through the eyes of the State Department of Transportation, which is the agency that constructed this project. And we were thinking that it was important to really demonstrate that the project is moving forward. One of the kind of concerns being that the public often kind of thinks projects take too long, or they're not aware of the progress that's being made. So to really make sure the public is aware of all that progress, but also an operations aspect to it to help reduce traffic delays and reduce confusion that might be related to the construction, and to try to address people's questions in advance. So the audiences that we had in mind were first and foremost frequent visitors to downtown. This would include employees or people who patronize the businesses in downtown, as well as the businesses themselves, business owners. Also important to be speaking to city officials like city council or elected officials who are likely to receive questions about the project. And also, again, first responders or utilities or people who are accessing the downtown for commercial reasons, delivery users or others that would have an urgent need to access the downtown so they know what to expect in terms of the construction and where they can access and what they can't. And we think that the things that people really would care about the most is parking, first and foremost. We know parking always comes up, particularly any kind of local project and in a business district in particular. So where can people park to be able to access things that they want to access? Also the delivery of goods, how can goods be moving in and out of the business district? How to navigate roads and sidewalks during the construction, whether you're visiting the downtown or traveling through, and then also the length. When is this all going to be over? And we talked about different channels for distributing the video. Lots of great ideas came up, like posting the video on the city's website, playing the video on the local public access channel, or links to digital newsletters, having the state part posted on the state website, but also things like the Chamber of Commerce. And we talked about the potential to use YouTube or other online streaming mechanisms for all those digital opportunities. And we didn't get into the details of some of the others, but like the local public access channel and how that would all work, but lots of great ideas there. And we did also talk about that when using social media, we might need to be prepared to do some promoted posts or paid posts to enable the videos to really get out there and reach the audience that we want to reach. And we didn't finish the full worksheet, but we did get into the storytelling aspect. And I think that we were settling in on kind of more of a historical perspective, telling a story that talks about what's the problem that we're trying to solve with this project. In this case, I believe one of the problems is that the sidewalks in the downtown were too narrow. It needed to be widened to accommodate the growing business district and the types of uses that are occurring on the street. So one idea was to start with kind of clips from featuring local business people talking about the project and the challenges that they've had before the project, and then have more updates from New Hampshire DOT to really discuss how they're solving those issues and how they incorporated that feedback from the public into the project, and showing how the project is being phased, how they're addressing different issues like safety and access throughout the project. And that is about where we ran out of time. Does anybody from the group want to add anything? Anything that I missed? Anything important?
As just Jamie, I put a clarification that the city actually constructed and managed the project because they were a direct recipient, but the state DOD did help out with some aspects. So.
Oh, thank you, Jamie. Okay.
All right, so who do we have up next? I think we have two more teams for the report out, and So whichever one wants to go next, either Jacob's team or Mac's team.
I can report out for Mac's team.
All right, thank you, Catherine.
I'm not going to share my screen because I didn't, my software was playing up, but I have the notes in the site, so I'll just kind of orally share. And I think like a lot of what you guys have already brought up covers a lot, so I'll just go for the points which were like different. So we decided to look at educating the public on how to comment on a plan document. That was very relevant to me in some of the work that I've had to do recently. And when we're looking at the objectives of the video, the main thing was to make it clear, quick, and easy to understand using very common language. And also we were thinking that it should be a little bit generic so it can be reused on future projects that use the same software. And just keep in mind, and maybe include a little bit of kind of like troubleshooting, but without making it scary. Because you know how you always go to like the wrong part of the page and you click something and then it all messes up. Well, thankfully we're in a world now where there aren't that many red doors in there, but there are still some for some. And another thing about the object of this video was to make it accessible. So in many different ways. So thinking about the closed captioning, colors in terms of contrast and color blindness, and then kind of even as we were thinking about more the logistics of the video, making sure that accessibility for like the other languages. So that was definitely something which was in the background. So what aspects of this idea does your organization care about? And the biggest thing that we were talking about was how it was the value of bringing people into the conversations, helping them feel valued, helping them feel heard, and not being left behind as technology is introduced. Because it's meant to be augmenting what we already have, not replacing, but some can feel very much challenged by it. And also the idea of like heading off controversy, just being transparent and open and saying, here's how you can do it, makes them feel that people are in the loop instead of being outside. So then when we were thinking about the audience, one of the things that we started thinking about, and that kind of also connected to the storytelling format, is how do we make it really personal? Because I think we have this generic picture of that person who can't use technology, whereas instead, like I like to pull in, like my mom is not really very technologically savvy, and when I have to talk her through something on the screen, she's like, well, what does the icon look like? I don't know where I'm going. I'm like, look out for the pencil, it looks like this. And I think that was something where we're trying to make it personal, which means people can relate to it, but also not be kind of offended by it. So generic but personal all at the same time. Then in terms of when it got down to distribution, how do we distribute it, like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and things like that? Well, one element that we started talking about was, well, how even do you share it on the website? So often kind of you have a project website and you just have a link, say click here to see the video. Well, I think some of the videos are important enough that you kind of want everyone to view it, whereupon you are embedding it within the web page so that it's kind of an automatically running rather than something else. And when we got into the story telling format, I think I'm very much stuck in kind of the old way of kind of like you keep it pretty generic. And I like what somebody else had just recently said about, well, you might need to get buy-in from the higher ups if you're not going to go beyond like the normal storytelling. But I think that that's really important. I like, for me, like the idea of helping people work through using a public comment tool is all about like helping the underdog. So the underdog story, overcoming obstacles. I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And like, why aren't we doing it the old way? And so then when we were talking about visual elements that you'd want to include, for that, there are two key elements. Like one is like the personal aspect. So like you and a colleague talking through it in someone's home, kind of in a home environment, like, hey, like a tutorial type thing, but also an annotated screen share. So it was really useful earlier today when we were seeing that video and they were talking through it. And it would also be useful, I think, for some if you did that big red circle around it saying, click here, don't click here. This is how you reset it. So that those were the two kind of different parts of the filming that you'd have to keep in mind. In terms of obstacles and challenges, we had quite a few because we're talking about using technology to explain technology. So one of the biggest things is you might even need 3 different videos because you've got Macs, PCs, and then tablets, like the very like touchscreen environment, the ones which don't have any keyboards or mice. And then also if you're using an app for this comment, how you give comments, you'd have to do Apple versus the Android versions, which can sometimes be very different in terms of where they hide things. So that was one of the things that it would present a challenge because you may have to do more than one video. And the technology evolves slowly but fast enough over the course of a project length. So you'd have to maybe update it. And one of the biggest reminders to us was keeping it simple. I think we all like to make things overly convoluted, and keeping it simple is really important. So I think, oh, and the best thing was right near the end, Mac had a great comment about quick reference sheets. So even though we have this video which is explaining how to use this, also having that quick reference sheet that gives, he mentioned how quite a lot of FHWA websites in the like caption of the video, they also have like a link to this, and it has like links to the like extra project information, quick snapshots of showing where to click and where to do that. So I think remembering that the video is not everything was an important part. I don't know if Marguerite wants to add anything else. But those are the main things.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I'll add to that is just that last part about, and the I guess the area I was referencing was the Fed Essentials, Fed Aid Essentials for local public agencies. We have a variety of different videos and topic areas on that website, but also, like I said, you know, it includes the resources, the specific fact sheets that go along with that specific topic to help you navigate as you're watching the video. You can easily click on the reference. It'll take you directly to our federal highway website, our law, regulation, fact sheets, etc. So it makes it easy to navigate while watching the video.
Great, excellent, thank you. And then the final group, who is our report out person?
I can do it, I guess.
Great, thank you, JB.
This is JB Mack. What we talked about was that this was my video idea, so it's only fair that I report out. Basically, we're about to do an update to our long-range plan. So this is a long-range plan, just like the other previous examples that we heard. What we want to do is kick off a quarter planning process. We have our long-range plan is sort of partitioned out into different quarters so that we can talk on more local or regional issues with we have a pretty large region we find it useful to break out into quarters and talk to groups of towns and stakeholders in towns that are on that quarter. So what we ended up talking about is creating sort of a series of videos but starting it off with maybe a generic video that just kicks off explaining how people on the corridor can participate in the long-range transportation plan update. Some of the things that we wanted to drive home, we're in a mostly rural region, but we want to try to get people thinking about multimodalism, other forms of transportation other than the car, and especially recognizing that we have an aging population, that there are a lot of people that are going to be aging out of the workforce, a lot more seniors that are not driving, and we want to attract young people to our region that may be excited about having other types of transportation options. Those are some things that have been values that we've been trying to stimulate conversation about in our region. Nothing too different from what's already been reported earlier. We want to remove barriers to participation, not just get the usual suspects at our meetings to talk about challenges and opportunities for our various corridors. So although we want to reach out to all of the public, we definitely want to get more participation from typically underserved populations. what do we think is important with respect to the audience and the long range plan? Well, we think people just want to be able to live their life conveniently, inexpensively. You know, they want to have access to opportunity to go on with their daily lives, whether it's shopping, reaching medical services, getting to work, those kinds of things. And an important piece that was brought up by a member of our group was that we want to make sure that the video communicates that everyone's ideas are heard and mattered. We want to break down barriers affecting trust. We don't want people to think that if they're participating, that this is just an exercise that we're required to do to try to get public involvement. We actually want public involvement. We think the long-range plan needs to reflect what the people living in the area care about. Channels for distribution, we talked about typicals. You can see them there listed on the page. We talked about some different storytelling formats, and our facilitator said not to think of it as and producing videos in genres, but just taking elements from these different ways of telling a story. So one idea that came out was this underdog idea, where maybe we start off the video profiling an elderly woman that lives on the corridor that no longer is able to drive a vehicle, and she kind of tells her story about what her challenges are, to get people thinking more about their neighbors and public and the types of people we'd love to hear from. One of the really key pieces, I think, point that was made in our conversation was this idea of storyboarding, that it's you don't want to just go out and shoot a video without any sort of sense of how it's going to take shape. Storyboarding means that you sort of write down what are the images that you want featured and the things that you want to stress in certain shots. When you piece the video together, how will those pieces of video be blended together to make a compelling story? And we didn't get through to the end of the worksheet with our group. That's about where we stopped.
Well, thank you, JB. Even though you didn't get through to the end, I think you guys really had some great discussions, it sounds like. And there was a request to maybe get copies of all the worksheets from the different groups. So if you could, whoever was a note taker, if you could just email your completed worksheet, or as completed as it was, and send it to Jacob Korn at jacob.korn@dot.gov. We'll make sure to distribute that to everyone. Did we miss anyone or any group for the report outs? I think that may have been everyone. I just want to make sure I didn't lose track. Okay, so we have some time now for questions and answers and a little bit of discussion with Zach. And so, Zach, there was a question from sort of toward the end of your presentation before we went into the breakout rooms that I wanted to address. And this was from Mary Lee. She asked if you had any suggestions for applications that could be used for ensuring accessibility and also, for captioning in different languages.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's always something that we need to be concerned about, especially when we're talking about videos. Captions are a must. I've always just gone the YouTube route, which is a pretty standard way of getting captions. If you upload your video to YouTube, it'll auto caption. They do an okay job. I usually have to go in and fix a few things. But it's an easy way to get captions on a video, and then you can download the SRT file and upload those to other platforms. That's the way I've done it. In most editing softwares, there is a way to just put them in directly, but it's a little bit more effort because you have to hand code the timestamps and then write the captions yourself. So I go the YouTube route, but there are other I know there are a number of softwares out there that you can use to get those captions on as well.
Any suggestions or any other participants that may have used something other than YouTube that they'd like to share? Feel free to put that into the chat pod or unmute and just let us know. I also invite anybody who has any questions for Zach, if you want to unmute or put your question into the chat pod. But while we're waiting for any questions to pop up, I'd like to ask Kevin to bring up one of our poll questions. And so, what do you think are ways or concrete steps that you could take to make DIY video creation part of your regular public engagement toolbox? Well, they got that message, Zach. Just do it. I think, in Scott's group's report out, they did talk a little bit about front office or leadership buy-in, maybe on the concept of videos in general, but, also on specific videos as well. And I know that's definitely something that we have to keep in mind for FHWA videos, and also that we were able to get it through our public affairs office. Oh, excellent. Here's PowerPoint videos. Try PowerPoint videos. I don't know who put that in, but that's a really great option. If you have a slide deck that you want to put, an actual face presentation of there's actually a feature in PowerPoint that allows you to, you'll be in a little window on top of your presentation slides somewhere. And then, you'll be recorded both your visual and audio that, you can easily share that video recording with the slides. Let's see, formalizing the process and the people, after you do a couple, maybe you do have a formalized process that makes it easier, particularly institutionally, down the road. If you're no longer in charge of producing the videos, somebody else won't have to recreate the wheels, or sort of be able to build upon what you already did. And talking with team, commissioners, stakeholders about the importance of engaging people this way. Facebook and Instagram's algorithms do favor videos. Yes, and I think that gets back to Zach's point, right, about how videos is really one way in which a lot of people like to consume their information. Developing an internal team, and it doesn't have to be a huge team, but maybe a couple of people who are interested in developing video content or have a little bit of experience. Zach, could you talk a little bit about what the setup is over at UDOT for this?
For the process, you mean?
Like a video production team.
At UDOT, we have a team. Well, there's really just two of us. When I was hired on about 5 years ago, it was just me. And I was producing videos. We hired one other person to produce videos, so we're still very, very lean. And the process is still sort of evolving, but it really is just sitting down with whomever wants to make a video and working through this process, the same process that we went through, to understand the objective, to understand what it is they want to do and want to create, and then. My colleague is the one that actually does most of the shooting. He will go out and get the video and do the video and do the audio, do the shooting for that. And then he and I kind of share the editing and the putting the videos together piece. But I do like the suggestion here, the cross-trained staff, so that not one person knows how to create. I think that's key, because you don't want to rely on just one person. You don't want there to be one person doing all the videos, because that can burn them out and it can create a bottleneck in the process. So having a good, robust team that kind of shares that knowledge, I think, is the best way to set up that process to make sure that you're always having somebody that can help with videos when needed.
We also have a question and a really great sharing of information in the chat pod. So Michael Cole was talking about the auto-generated captions on YouTube and that they're not ADA compliant. So as Zach, as you were saying, it does kind of require a little bit of editing on the back end to make sure that they're good for prime time. So as a rough price guide, this is again Michael providing this information. Maine DOT has a contractor who will type up CART certified captioning for a flat $70 for any video length up to 40 minutes in length. So that way they can ensure that they're 100% compliant. If it's a shorter video, I guess it looks like you guys do that yourselves, because right, if it's a flat rate, it doesn't make sense to maybe have it contracted out for like a 2 or 3 minute video. But if you have a half-hour long video, then you probably want to contract that out. So thanks for sharing that, Michael. I think that's really helpful. JB had a question for you, Zach. What specs should they be looking for if they're looking to acquire a good microphone and lighting kit?
That's a great question. I'm going to be super honest and say that I don't have a lot of that technical expertise. My colleague is the one that has a lot of that. So I don't know that I could give you any specific specs. But I mean, I can tell you that based on what I've used and what I'm familiar with, there's not, you're pretty good to go with a lot of different products. I know Rode makes a really good microphone. They're kind of a leader in the microphone industry. Sony makes a really good affordable one. So I can get you some specs. I can work with my colleague and get you some specific specs if you need those. I can also give you some recommendations if you need to. Off the top of my head, though, I'm sorry, I can't give you any numbers to go off of.
All right, thanks. And any other questions, continue to put those into the chat pod. Kevin, I'll ask you to bring up the last poll question for today. But also, before we kind of deal with this question, I just wanted to ask people not to disappear when we're doing the wrap up. I did want to get people thinking ahead, because for our next session next week, where we'll be talking about institutionalizing the use of VPI in your agency. We do have a time for a state MPO, state DOT and local partner showcase of, discussing or demonstrating examples of where your agency has been integrating VPI into your everyday business practices. And so, if you're prepared to do a presentation, even if it's just an informal one, where you just unmute yourself and maybe turn on your camera to talk about it a little bit, we'd love to hear from you. I think the last roundtable we had with the local partners, the COGs and the MPOs, those presentations and sort of the examples that were shared just kind of blew me away. So I think we'd all agree, we'd love to hear from everyone. So if that is something that you'd be interested in doing, so that we can sort of schedule into the time that we've allotted for that, put something in the chat pod now or reach out to me or Jacob and let us know. So I shared Jacob's email address earlier. I've put mine into the chat pod. So back to this poll question, how do you sell the benefits of using DIY videos or visualizations, going back to Jim's presentation, with others in your organization, maybe who aren't as comfortable with this idea? They're sort of okay with how you've traditionally been doing things, and maybe they don't see the benefit of the cost, or whether that's just monetary cost or time and resources that would be needed to start producing these videos or visualizations. So that's a great point, to talk to those who maybe don't understand the benefits of these tools and say, everybody's really busy. Everyone's attention span is shorter and shorter these days. And so it's a really effective way to reach people. It's an important thing to meet people where they are. And if that's at home when they have the time to sit down and watch a video, then, that's something that we really need to look into. Another great point is that it can help increase trust in getting involved in the process. And I think we saw that in a number of the spreadsheets, not the spreadsheets, the worksheets, in explaining to the public the process and how they can be engaged and where the agency will be responding to comments. And I think that it also goes back to Zach in your earlier presentation where you shared that example that UDOT had, just showcasing the work that your maintenance crews or road crews are doing out there and humanizing them, right? So let's see, you can start off with a larger or controversial project where visualization will be a real benefit and then develop your program from there. So piloting your visualization or use of videos. And then if that's successful and you can demonstrate that it worked really well, then you can develop from there. And I'm not sure who put this into the poll response, but that you've incorporated the use of, whether it's videos or visualizations into your public participation plan. And videos are a way for you to work toward hitting your goals for performance and public engagement. So that's really great in that, actually sort of quantitatively measuring the impact maybe of some of these tools that you're using, including visualizations and videos. So Zach has provided a link to a wired lavalier microphone that he uses. Oh, and Michael, thank you. I didn't realize that you're Maine DOT's staff videographer. So Michael has provided his contact information in the chat pod for anybody who wants to reach out to him to talk a little bit more about that. And I saw Michael had typed in some information about lighting as well, and a lighting kit and so on. So I'm not going to read that whole comment since it's a long one, but please, make sure to read that. So any other questions or thoughts, comments on the use of either DIY videos or project visualizations? This is your opportunity to get input from not just Zach and Jim, but your peers who may also have experiences that they can share.
Lena, I just had a general comment. This is Lucy. In terms of project visualization, I would say that, when he was putting in examples of trees and things like that, and I've worked at the local level looking at site plans and all that, and I know a lot of people are visual learners and they learn by that. So I would say it's important that that you have, like if you're going to have trees or vegetation or wildflowers, put them in. But if you really don't intend to have that as part of your project, don't include that, because people have these expectations when they see something, even, or say that this is conceptual, obviously at this point, but oh yeah, we saw that and they were going to plant all these trees or wildflowers and it never happened. So, you get that perception of what you hope to do or what you plan to do are two different things. So I think that's just something to keep in mind as you're doing any project visualization, because a lot of people are interested in the whole picture, the visual picture, the scenery, the natural features and how that's incorporated into that. So be realistic of what you can put in or you intend to put in. I think that's just a good thing to just keep in mind as you're doing those.
That's a great point, Lucy, and something that Jim didn't highlight as much earlier, but I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes if you put in too much detail, people may think that, oh, that's exactly how it's going to look, which can be misleading. If you're doing a streetscape and and the light fixtures look a certain way. They may think that that's what the end project is going to look like exactly. So sometimes it may be better to include a little less detail, or to explain clearly that these are just conceptual drawings, and that these specific design of things may look different.
Yeah, this is Jim. That's a great comment. And a lot of the times when I'm putting in trees, I'm trying to match existing conditions. So a lot of the trees that I'm putting in are existing trees. I'm not necessarily putting in, trees in the kind of proposed part of the project unless we're actually going to be installing them. But yeah, that can be misleading, and it's something that, we try to be careful about. The other thing I sometimes do is I kind of intentionally go with a lower level of detail just so that it's not, falsely misleading like that. So yeah, that is a good point.
All right, so thank you, Kevin, for bringing up the poll for key takeaways. So, what has been your key takeaway from today's session? And if you want to unmute and also share any additional thoughts on that, please feel free to do so. It looks like the one that's at the top right now is that, even if you have limited experience, you can still train yourself and still make compelling videos and visualizations. So it doesn't have to be super fancy. Remember, you're just trying to communicate a message effectively, and it doesn't require a ton of bells and whistles to be able to do that. And yes, just do it. Just get started. You can, start with simple things and work your way up. And video and graphic production doesn't need to be a major investment to be successful. That's a great tip. Yes, it doesn't necessarily take a lot of time or resources. And even, very simple videos and visualizations can help to communicate different project or design options. I'm glad that the visualization work group is a key takeaway for somebody. So again, just putting a plug in there, if that's the group you're interested in engaging with, please reach out to Jim. I guess I'll invite Kevin or Jacob. Do you have any key takeaways from today in addition to what we're seeing showing up here in the poll?
I think most of my key takeaways are already showing up in the poll, so I think that's great news. I think that for me the most important one is really the just do it one, the one at the very top. Not just because it's a catchy slogan that we're all familiar with, but also just because I think sometimes there can be a bit of paralysis in thinking that this is just too hard or too difficult, or I don't have the skills or the training to be able to do this. But I think what most people find is when they get started that they actually have a lot more skills than they think they do, and it's not as hard as they might think it is, and the learning curve isn't quite as steep as people might assume that it is. I also really like the point that Zach made, and I think it's showing up here on the list as well, that videos really and visualizations empower agencies to be in charge of telling their own story. To not only rely, news media coverage is usually welcome and appreciated, but they're going to choose to focus on what they want to focus on, what they think will be kind of most compelling from their readership standpoint, but that might leave out important details that the agency wants to make sure are clearly communicated. So I think that's a really important point as well. And I liked, from the prior question, some of the points that people made about how to kind of, if you need to kind of sell this concept of, investing some resources in developing visualizations and videos, the idea of kind of tying that back to your goals for public participation and using those anecdotes or statistics about how people engage with content online, that they prefer videos, that it can overcome some barriers to show things visually, either in a video or a visualization. I thought that was a really compelling point as well.
Yeah, I also thank you, Kevin. I also really just out of the gate when Zach was presenting, I thought that was such an important point that to be able to tell the story that you want to, that's really a key benefit. And I think that those in agency leadership, that's probably a message that they can relate to. So I think that's a really important point. So as we're wrapping up for today, I just wanted to put a last call out for any questions that people still have that remain unanswered, or any other impressions or key takeaways that you want to share. And I thanks James for providing a link to an example of Street Mix. Definitely want to take a look at that. Do you want to, James, provide us a little bit more context and tell us about that example that you provided?
Me?
Yes.
Street Mix is a tool I learned about from one of our local municipalities. It's a visualization aid, and it comes with a kit of parts. So you can assemble any layout of street cross section that you would like based on the kit of parts. You just put it in the right of way, and then you can pick from like sort of a flashcard deck of different objects that you can place into the right of way. And so it it might take 10 minutes to make a cross section that is contextually relevant to your project, and then it's an easy thing that you can share with the public and helps visualize maybe a road diet or new construction or any kind of road type that you might be working with.
Great, thank you. And in that little sort of thumbnail that I see in the chat, I recognize that sort of layout. I'm pretty sure I've seen roadway cross sections appear in different environmental documents that look like that. So it's I never realized it came from Street Mix, so that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a free tool too, so it's not like you're buying proprietary software. You just go on a web page and make it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. All right, so we are wrapping up here. I just wanted to remind you again, so our next session, next Tuesday, we'll be talking about institutionalizing the use of VPI. And it sounds like a big word, but really and maybe you feel like your agency is not that far along in institutionalizing, but again, I think there's something that all of you could probably share in terms of your experiences so far in approaching that. And so, just send me an email or Jacob and let us know if you'd like to take a couple of minutes next time to talk about that in the sort of showcase. Again, I don't want it to sound intimidating, like you have to have a really sort of involved presentation or anything like that, but just being ready to share and talk about what your agency has been doing, maybe some tips or experiences that you've had. So with that, we're ending a couple minutes early, but I wanted to thank you all for your participation. I know that sometimes, especially in the breakout rooms, there may be technological challenges, or folks are a little hesitant to unmute themselves rather than type in the chat pod. So I appreciate all your participation and engaging in the exercise and the report out sessions, all the great discussions and questions that we had. And we're going to look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday morning. All right, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks.